You are Locked On Chargers Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Los Angeles on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Chargers Postcast. Pete Fox, Kenyon Barner, 10 years in the NFL, 3 rings. I am Pete Fox, covering sports in LA dating back to 2007 for ESPN LA and NBC Sports Radio. Well, Kenyon, that did not go the way that Charger fans would have hoped after the first half. Start off pretty good. Things were looking good. Then it wasn't. So we'll get into the details of really where this game turned, which in my opinion was the second half when Justin Herbert left the game. But first, I want to tell you that today's episode of the Locked On Chargers Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It was 10-7 at the break for the Chargers. They did a pretty nice job of slowing down the Steelers offense. But then again, this first quarter especially, was really all defense. And then the second half happened and the Chargers completely fell apart. And obviously the biggest change there was Justin Herbert left the game and Heineke came in, and the defense for the Steelers really just, I don't know if it was coincidental or if they saw the opening, but they just took advantage of the Charger offensive line. And if I had to say one comment about this entire game, I would say that JJ Watt is better than Joe Alt. This is a fact of life. JJ Watt ate Joe Alt for his lunch today, and it was not just once or twice. I'm not a guy that pays a ton of attention to offensive and defensive line work, but this was so egregiously one-sided, and it wasn't just Joe Alt. I mean, it was the entire Charger offensive line was getting beat on a regular basis. It felt a lot to me like yesterday's Trojan-Michigan game, where the Trojans were in it and until the fourth quarter, and then Michigan took over, and that's what happened today. But it wasn't just the fourth quarter for the Steelers. It was the entire second half where the Steelers, both offensively and defensively, just beat the Chargers up and down the field. I mean, what, they have 1 first down in the second half, no first downs in the third quarter, and negative yards. Yeah, I mean, what was your sense on this, that the Steelers just took advantage of the home field and just beat a somewhat inexperienced Chargers team?
I kind of felt like the Chargers got away from what they were doing in the first half. They were sending a lot of help to Watt. They were chipping out with the backs. In the second half, it seemed as if there was a lot of one-on-one matchups on the offensive line, and I don't know why that was. That's where I think the game changed. Sometimes to me, coaches get away from what's working. And I think Watt was in on maybe 2 sacks. They didn't credit him with 1, and it was the sack with Cam Hayward and him. They gave it strictly to Cam, but there's a lot of one-on-one matchups where there shouldn't have been. They should have stuck to what was working. I was chipping, I was helping. You can't let Watt do what he did in that game. He had his way, like you said, and it wasn't just him. It was down the line. Each and every guy had a game on that defensive line. It was just a tough game for the Chargers. Very tough game. Not a game that obviously they wanted to come out and play. Not a game that they wanted to put on film. But this is the NFL. At the end of the day, you're going to have off days. You're going to have bad games. But now you see how they bounce back next week.
Yeah, the thing that had been working for them was running the ball a lot and then throwing the ball occasionally, and that was working on the second aspect. I mean, I thought Herbert was okay. 12 of 18, 125 yards. Like, if he stayed in there, he probably gets to like 20 of 30 in that neighborhood, around 200. That may have been enough, but J.K. Dobbins was just stuffed. And I'm upset because I put him in a prize pick because I know how effective he's been, and his number was like 56 yards. I was like, he'll bang that out easily. And 44, even lost yards at times. 15 touches though. I mean, they were giving him the ball, which is not surprising.
This is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a Pittsburgh Steelers defense. This is a Mike Tomlin defense. This is their DNA. This is how they're built. They're typically always stout in the run game. So I wasn't coming into the game. I didn't think JK would have the game that he's had the past 2 weeks. I thought he would have a better game. But knowing how Pittsburgh plays on the defensive side of the ball, I knew it would be a tougher game.
Yeah, the guy that was playing opposite Hegburn or something like that was that guy's name. Playing opposite JJ Watt on the Herbig. That dude was getting as well. 3 tackles, but 2 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. So he was all over both Herbert and Heineke, along with TJ Watt, who only had 1 sack. But God, the amount of pressure that was coming and the penalties forced by that dude he was almost a one-man wrecking crew. And then you look over on the other side of the ball for the Steelers, and Justin Fields, like, that's the best we've ever seen him play, right?
Had a day. He looked great. He looked phenomenal. 25-32 with 245 and a touchdown. The last pass that he threw for the long touchdown, that was probably one of the most impressive throws that I've seen him make. I think he threw that to what's the young kid's name? Calvin Austin. The timing on it, if you look at Justin last year in Chicago, he was late on a lot of throws. He was hesitant. He fit the ball right in there, right on time, kept the receiver running, and went to the yard, got in the paint. But that was definitely the best we've seen him look this season. And I would say going back into last year as well, he looked great.
Yeah, 3rd and 15 early in the third, a slant play for 26 yards where the Chargers blitzed. Nice pass, right on the money. He was zipping the ball in there, hitting the receivers right where they needed to be. On the other side of the ball, when Herbert was in the game, your feeling was that he shouldn't have been there at all. I thought he was okay, but really what disrupted things for Herbert was the defensive pressure. He couldn't get set. There were many times where he couldn't step up in the pocket. I mean, they were just all up in his business, and it's hard to throw that ball when you don't have time.
Absolutely. It was what we could say back when I was in Tampa. It was hell for the offensive line today. It was hell. Those guys were getting after it. Like you said, the pressure. I think they had 7 quarterback hits, and that's not counting the pressures that they had of collapsing the pocket. It was a tough day. Again, this is just one of those games where obviously you want to get out healthy, which they didn't, but it's just a day that you kind of got to go back, look at the film, make some adjustments, realize where you're good at, where you're not good at, and try and get better at those things. And today the offensive line wasn't good enough to win this game.
Yeah, I was surprised. They won the turnover battle, to the best of my knowledge, 1 versus 0. And they got some luck on that turnover because the ball bounced around like a Plinko ball and came up for the Chargers. But, that turned into a sack, 2 short Dobbins runs, and a punt. I mean, so I don't want to put that on the Chargers for not calling the right plays at that point. It just felt like the Steelers were like all over it. They were just like, that's fine. Turn the page. Let's move on. We're going to stop you and get the ball right back. And they did. And that's when Herbert went out, and then the game was over. So the penalties on that drive leading right at the drive right after that, right at the end of the third, penalties, Chargers just one after the other, helped Steelers march on down the field. But early in the fourth, at the end of that drive on a 3rd and 9, they came up, forced a field goal try, and that made it 13-10. So into the fourth quarter, the Chargers were still in the game, right? They had a shot, but Heineke made 1 completion, and that's when Joe Alt just was like, I'm tired, I'm out. And JJ Watt was like, let's go. JJ Watt,
JJ Watt was like a shark in the water. He smelled blood and he attacked.
Exactly.
And Heineke didn't stand a chance either. He was under pressure almost every time he dropped back. So never allowed to get comfortable. But I want to 3 for 11 on 3rd down. You're not going to win any NFL game going 3 for 11. You have to be able to extend drives. You have to be able to keep your offense on the field, tire out their defense. And they just weren't able to do that. Again, a rough day. That's what all I can keep going back to. When you have a game like this, and I'll say this, the physical aspect of it. This was the first game where the Chargers were out physical. In the first half, the Chargers were a physical team, both offensively and defensively. In that second half, it was a completely different team, completely different outlook on the game. Pittsburgh was taking it to the Chargers, whether it was offensively, defensively. They were just a more physical team. They out physical the Chargers today.
Yeah, and from that standpoint, obviously the Chargers now know what to expect from good defensive teams, where you're right, they haven't experienced that yet. And it's kind of like all right, now we know what we're in store for when we go up against the Chiefs next week and so forth. I mean, that's what you have to be ready for. I don't think we were terribly surprised that it was going to be like this. Again, early in the first quarter, it was 3-3 punt, 3-3 punt. It was back and forth, not a lot happening, physical game, loud. That's what you expect from a Steeler game early in the season in Pittsburgh. Again, it reminded me a lot of the game yesterday for the Trojans and Michigan Wolverines. It was just in the trenches, 3 yards on a cloud of chewed up tire rubber. And, or maybe they do have grass. Do they have grass in Pittsburgh? I think.
Yeah, the grass.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was not terribly surprising. The first half this game a little bit felt like a Super Bowl to me, where the first half was basically inconsequential, and the entire game came into clarity in the second half. Unfortunately, that clarity was in favor of the Pittsburgh Steelers and not the Chargers. After the break, we're going to talk a little bit about where things turned defensively for the Chargers. That was in the first half. He's Kenyon Barner. I am Pete Fox. This is the Locked On Chargers postcast on the Locked On Sports LA YouTube channel, the place to hang out when every game is done. You can also listen to us wherever you find your podcasts on the Locked On Chargers podcast feed. We appreciate you coming in right after the game, allowing us to be your source for your team every day. Today's episode of the Locked On Chargers postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Hold on a second. Got to do this. Then I got to hear this and see this, because they had that special deal going on for the Sunday ticket with YouTube TV. Well, guess what? That's over. If you didn't get that done by today, you are out of luck. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return of FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Head on over, FanDuel.com, download the app, have it ready on your phone when you're watching games. It definitely makes it more interesting and more exciting. FanDuel.com. All right, Chargers fall in this one. Final score 20-10. And I honestly, it was kind of not that close. The second half unraveled for a way against the Chargers that was just not in their favor, with Justin Herbert going out. I don't want to get on the excuse train, but facts are facts. Justin Herbert leaving the game was a big deal for the Chargers. And another big deal defensively was when Joey Bosa left the game. That first quarter, as I said, it was tight. It was physical. The Chargers were hanging. And then all of a sudden the Steelers, their second drive of the game early in the second quarter, they marched right down the field, spread the field out, and scored a touchdown. And I was curious what you saw on that drive that changed so dramatically. All I saw was Joey Bosa on the sideline without his shoulder pads on, but there had to be a little bit more going on there for the Steelers offensively. Did they change the approach on that second drive? Did they spread it out a little bit more, give Justin Fields a little bit more opportunity to move the ball? Or was it simply that things got easier for him when Joey Bosa left the game?
I think it's a combination of all those things. It was things got easier. Obviously, not having Bosa on the field is a huge impact defensively. You lose a all-star type player. You use a all-pro player that's able to get to the quarterback, apply pressure. You lose you lose a significant piece of your defense. But I think Pittsburgh stuck to their game plan. There wasn't any big plays outside of, I think, the long pass that was about 20-something yards, I believe. But it was 5 yards here, 6 yards here, 8 yards here, 2 yards here. It was just kind of a consistent flow of offense marching down the field. So it was definitely Bosa leaving the field, but I think it was more so Pittsburgh just sticking to what they had, what their game plan was.
On the other side of it, you could say if
Go ahead.
JJ Watt left the game, right, it would have been
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of that way for the Chargers, right?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Just an impact play. And anytime you don't have that, obviously your defense is lacking. And there's things that can be exploited when you don't have a guy like Bosa on the field.
Yeah, Khalil Mack had a good game.
He did.
5 tackles, 1 sack, 1 TFL. And the guy that I thought was the most impactful defensive dude for the Chargers was Denzel Perriman. I mean, not terribly surprised by this, but he had a day. I mean, he was all over the place making plays. 9 tackles, 6 solo tackles, and 1 tackle for loss.
Had a day. And that's who Denzel has been. He's a thumper, as they say during the game. Watching him come downhill, lay the wood, lay guys out. He just had a day. This looked like old Denzel Perriman. He had a flashback today and had a heck of a game for himself.
Yeah, the Chargers. I keep going back to that Trojan Michigan game yesterday, but another thing that to me felt like went in favor of Pittsburgh, much like it did for Michigan yesterday, was the game plan, the scheming, as you just pointed out. The Steelers stuck to their game plan, run the ball to throw the ball, and that's exactly what they did in the second half. That's where things turn, and that's an old-fashioned philosophy in football. You got to run the ball to be able to throw the ball, and that's what they did. Najee Harris, 18 carries for 70 yards. They just kept pounding it down the Chargers' throat. And it was like, they just felt to me like they were worn out. They were just like, we're tired. We can't keep up with this. And then that freed up the receivers, and Calvin Austin had a day as well. 4 catches, 95 yards, including that touchdown in the third. So they stuck to the game plan, but they also schemed well with the offensive line against the Chargers D line to eliminate dudes like Poona Ford, who's been very, very good for them. They were double teaming him like crazy, and Poona Ford was just like swallowed up. They had slow motion on a couple of plays where he's got one dude on either side of him, and he's just kind of being sandwiched. So you got to give credit to Pittsburgh's coaching staff. They just out schemed the Chargers.
No doubt about it. And anytime, again, going back to what this Pittsburgh DNA has been since Mike Tomlin has been, they're going to pound you. And it's a boxing match. It's a 12-round match. And it's, can you withstand these punches? Can you withstand these blows? They're not haymakers that they're throwing, but they're body shots. They're hitting you to the body, hitting you to the body, hitting you to the body, and eventually they hit you to that head and go for the knockout. And that's what this game was. That's what they did. They continue to give the Charger defense body blows. Short runs, power runs, putting bodies on bodies, driving guys off the ball. And eventually, as the game went on in that second half, getting into the fourth, we started to see the longer runs, the 15, 10 yards, 8 yards. And Najee Harris, that last run that capped the game for him. This was a typical Pittsburgh type game.
Yeah, I was thinking that's kind of what the Chargers been doing to people, right? With J.K. Dobbins,
Exactly.
just like pounding. Yeah, and then you free up a guy like Ladd McConkey had a pretty good game today. That was nice to see. Took another step towards becoming more comfortable with Justin Herbert. 3 catches, 44 yards. Quentin Johnson had the touchdown, which was a really nice play. Just nice timing, go route, simple, and a perfect pass from Justin Herbert right on the number, in stride, just pitch and catch at its finest. So I feel like the Chargers did some positive things. There's stuff to look at here and go, all right, cool. We don't feel fully bad. I mean, yeah, losing sucks, but ultimately not terribly surprised that this happened, right? This is kind of what we expected. And then with Justin Herbert leaving, well, it's going to be a lot different, a lot tougher. And, you know, I don't know that it would have gotten any better if they threw Easton Stick in there. I think it would have been the same sort of thing.
Sure.
Just fewer runs.
Or fewer but it wasn't the quarterback. You know, it was the D line getting the pressure that they were getting. So I don't believe it would have been any different at all. I think it would have been the same result. Just the Pittsburgh defensive line, those guys were like we've said time and time again today, they were really getting after the offensive line. So it wouldn't have been any different. It would have been the same result.
All right, Kenyon, after the break, I want to get your read on where you think these two teams stand after week 3. I don't know if you know this coming into the game, that both these teams were 2-0, and one of them was going to come out 3-0 when the game was over. Did you know that? That was an interesting fact from Jim Nantz.
It was a crazy fact.
What was interesting about that, though, was he could have just said this: if the Chargers win this game, it'll be their first 3-0 start since 2002. That is a stat.
That's informative. It kind of okay. I got that history. But to simply say somebody's going to be there. Well, no, I can't. I almost perished.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate to say this. They're still the number one team on CBS, but I feel like Nantz is losing a step. You know, he's stopped doing basketball, is doing the Masters still. Obviously, golf is a whole lot easier than football. But, you know, and again, he's not bad, but being one of the best of all time, I feel like he's losing a step. And Romo's good. Romo's definitely found his way, and less of the
had a moment now too, though. He had a moment now too. He had a moment.
Did he? Well, he's always been the prognosticator, you know, where he's calling the play before it happens. Most people hate that. I don't know why. I think it's kind of cool. Like, wow, like he's right on. He knows exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. So, you know, I think sometimes we're way too critical of the announcers. You know, people are like, this boils down to you either love them or hate them kind of a thing when it comes to announcers, right? There's nobody like, he's okay. And does anybody feel like, oh, I was going to watch that game, but I turned it off because I hate Romo or I hate Nantz? No, you're going to watch the game anyway.
You're going to watch the game anyway.
Yeah, if you want to see this game, if you're a Charger or a Steeler fan, you're going to watch the game. You're not going to be like, I was going to watch, but Tony Romo can't handle it. You know?
The announcing, yeah.
All right. After the game, we'll talk about just the Chargers and Steelers, where they are after 3 weeks and their records and so forth, and what comes next for both of them. It's the Locked On Chargers postcast on the Locked On Sports LA YouTube channel. Pete Fox, Kenyon Barner. You can hang out with us right after the game, and we'll break it down for you. You can also listen wherever you find your podcast on the Locked On Chargers podcast feed. All right, today's episode of the Locked On Chargers postcast also brought to you by DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day foods and snacks and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. Use promo code LOCKEDFALL24. That's LOCKED, fall, FALL 24 for 50% off, up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. There's a limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. It must be 21 to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol is only in select markets. Again, check out DoorDash in the middle of the game. I have a 97-year-old mother, and I visit her twice a week, and we usually go to the store and stock up. But there are times when I just don't feel like it. And there are times when she's tired of eating, frozen dinners, she eats like a college student now, let's be honest. She pops stuff in the microwave. So I'll use DoorDash and other services of the same ilk to just send her a meal sometimes. My wife's daughter's significant other is a huge fan of DoorDash. I mean, he would not be able to survive if it were not for DoorDash. Frequently, like almost daily, he's ordering something, and it could be a whole meal or a box of Band-Aids. It doesn't matter. And that's what's great about DoorDash. They are there for whatever you need. DoorDash, your door game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Again, you must be 21 to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol is available only in select markets. All right, Chargers fall to 2-1 after this 2010 loss in the Steel City at Pittsburgh. Steelers are 3-0, probably for the first time in a long time, but they definitely have it moving in the right direction. So, Kenyon, my question is this. Where do you think the Steelers are if we're doing like how other Colin Cowherd does his, top 5 rankings of teams? I look at these two teams and I feel like they're very good teams, but I don't know. Are they tops in the league? Are these tops in the AFC? Where are the Steelers and the Chargers after this game to you?
I think they're both still top 5, top 6 teams in the AFC. There's no doubt about that. The Chargers still have a dominant defense. Now, obviously, you need help to keep that in place, but they're still a top team in the AFC. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the way they performed, the way that Justin Fields performed today, if he can consistently do that throughout the rest of this season, they will be one of the better teams in the AFC without a doubt about it. Their defense, physical, strong, dominant defense. But both teams, like I said, are still top 5, top 6 teams in the AFC, and should, barring health, should look to make a playoff run.
Yeah, I feel like look, the Steelers' offense was better. Steelers were better across the board today, but I feel like, with the health aspect, if Justin Herbert is back in there sooner before later, I feel like the Chargers' offense is a little bit better than this Steeler team. And,
Absolutely.
But defense is the more important at this point of the season anyway. Well, look, isn't defense, if you had to choose one element, you want to have a better defense or a better offense, you want the better defense, right?
There's no doubt about that. There's a saying: offense wins games, defense wins championships. So I'm always going to prefer a better defense over an offense.
Yeah, right. It's like in golf: drive for show, putt for show.
Go back to Peyton Manning in those Denver days. It wasn't the offense that carried that team. It was the defense. It was the defensive dominance that won those games. So I'm going to take a dominant defense all day long.
So we have to then hope that Joey Bosa is not hurt severely, because we need him back in there, especially on to Kansas City. No, this is actually in LA, back at SoFi to face the Chiefs, who are obviously healthy and have both a good offense and defense. So that's going to be a challenge next week, to be sure, especially if Justin Herbert is not 100 and not even, potentially playing. So I give him credit. What's that?
What's your take on that? You think he'll be ready next week?
To me, I hate to use this cliche, but I am a fan of this cliche because it says a lot to me. Justin Herbert is a gamer, right? Absolutely. And that's a guy that's like, I would much rather be in there than not in there. And there are plenty, like, a lot of people look at that and go, that's obvious. They all want to play. No, not always. There are a lot of dudes in professional sports that are like, I'm just going to wait. Kawhi Leonard, for example. I don't know.
Wait a minute. Not a shot at Kawhi.
Come on.
How do you catch a strike?
You can't argue that. I know he's a Riverside guy and all, and a good guy, great player. But I don't know about his toughness. He's not the toughest guy out there in the NBA. Doesn't always want to. From another sport, let's go to the Angels' third baseman, Anthony Rendon. Doesn't always want to be in there, right? He's happy getting paid. He plays, but not always. He's definitely not a gamer. Justin Herbert is a gamer. To me, it's a very descriptive term. He's a guy that's like, you're going to have to peel this helmet off of my head, and I want to be out there unless I just physically cannot be. So he tried. I give him credit for that today. Never had a high ankle sprain. Have you? How tough is that to come back from?
I missed 10 weeks with a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprain.
Worse than a low? I've had the low ankle sprain.
Yes. Low ankle
sprain's harder?
Absolutely. The recovery process is so much tougher, so much harder. So had he made it out this game without any sort of setback, but based on the way he walked off the field, and there's no telling how much tape was around that ankle to keep it stable. I would love to see him play, but this is a long season. And so I would rather have him later in the year rather than him trying to force it early and hurt himself even worse. And then we miss out on Justin Herbert coming down the stretch of the line when we really need him. So I would love to see him play next week, but get healthy, Herbie. Get healthy. High ankle sprains aren't nothing to play with. They can linger. So I would, like I said, I would love to see him play, but get healthy. It's a long season.
Let me tell you about my low ankle sprain, Kenyon. It was the Turkey Bowl 1998. I was playing DB and I was backpedaling and I just rolled it and it was done for the second half. I was done after that. And, we lost that flag football game. I think it was 59-45, but
it was a good game though. It was a good game.
Not a lot of defense. Not a lot of defense.
But was it because you weren't there? And were you able to finish the game, or were you out?
No, I was brutal. I rolled that thing and it got all black and I thought I broke something, but it just got black and blue. I was down Actually, no, come to think of it, it was, immediately. It wasn't the
yeah.
Turkey Bowl. We called it the Ball and Chain Bowl because it was a day or two before one of my buddies' weddings. And we were all playing football at the park, two-hand rough touch, as we called it. And I think I wasn't in the wedding, but I was at the wedding. He didn't really have a big wedding party, but I was limping the whole, through the whole rehearsal dinner and the wedding. I could barely stand up. It was brutal. So
I know you showed up.
I said you were a gamer. Absolutely. I know what the low ankle sprain is about. I don't know the high ankle sprain. So yeah, we'll have to see what's coming up for Herbie. Hopefully he can get back in there, because next week is going to be no joke, no pushover against the Chiefs, even though it is in LA. We know how it goes at SoFi with the visiting team, especially when you have back-to-back Super Bowls. Everyone's a Chiefs fan now, right? I got people all up and down my street that are Chiefs fans. It's like, when did you become a Chiefs fan? Like 3 years ago?
Bandwagoners. I can't stand them. I can't. Oh, I've been a Chiefs fan. No, you haven't. You can't tell me anybody outside Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, exactly. Who do you know in Kansas City? Nobody. Are you from Kansas City? No.
No, not at all. Bandwagon. I can't stand them.
Oh, well, they're out there. So it's gonna be tough. We're gonna have to just keep our fingers crossed that Herbie gets some ice and whatever, some PRP maybe, or whatever it is you need to get that high ankle sprain feeling 100% to get back in there next week, because it's going to be an uphill battle if it's Heineke or Stick in there against the Chiefs. That would not be what we're looking for to try to get back on track.
And the implications of this game, so Herbie might try and play. He might try and play just because it is the Kansas City Chiefs division rivalry. So I can see him playing.
Yeah, that'll be at 125. We'll be here right afterwards. So make sure you join us. Chargers fall to 2-1. The final 20-10 in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. Nice win for the Steelers. Got to give credit where credit is due. They just beat them up and down the field, especially in the second half on both sides of the ball. And the Chargers come away from this one kind of licking their wounds, getting ready to. They're going to spend a lot of time watching tape this week. That is for sure, with regard to dealing with the offensive and defensive line and stopping the run and so forth. Because on the corners, I thought they did a really good job. It was in the trenches where they lost this one ultimately. So they'll be spending a lot of time trying to improve that aspect of the game. Again, 20-10, the final. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the comments. We'll be back next Sunday. Again, a late start because it's in LA, 125. And we'll talk to you right after then. Kenyon, enjoy the week. Thanks a lot as always. And we'll talk to you next Sunday. He's Kenyon Barner. I'm Pete Fox. This is the Locked On Chargers Postcast on the Locked On Sports LA YouTube channel. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.